Thank you.
Okay.
I'm looking at it as well. I'm good.
Okay. So I think we can do without.
Okay.
Shall I call to order?
Yes,
Okay.
because I did not hear from Joel, but Chelsea did email saying that she won't be able to make it.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay, so I will go ahead and call to order at 5:23 p.m. First agenda item is approval of the minutes from February. Do we have a motion to approve?
I so move.
Do we have a second? Steve, that's you. You're muted.
I'll second. Okay.
Okay. And then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. And that moves us along to our strategic plan. Hello, Mr. Lewis.
Oh, we can't hear you, Shawn. Oh.
I'm going to try the headphones. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you all about this. I think what would be easiest is if I would share my screen. I know you got the, excuse me, the document that that was included in your packet with some timelines, and it was kind of just a graphic that the communications department put together that really kind of maps out the process of trying to go from the council vision session that we had a all-day retreat back on January 25th, and from that process we took all of kind of the vision statements that they came up with and translated those into goals and outcomes. And then we took that back to council and had them verify and affirm those goals to see if we had kind of put the right goals to what their vision was. So they try to stay very big picture, as they should, and then we tried to get more granular and get down to the actual goals. And so from there, we finalized that. We sent that back to City Council and actually had Council fill out a survey that's now out to the public. You may have seen some of our social media posts where we put the exact same survey to the public to get their feedback. And once we get all of the feedback from the council, from the public, then we'll post all of that to the website and have a discussion with City Council. And of course, it'll be in the City Council packet to really finalize some of that. So what I'd like to do is go through and share my screen. This could take a second. I think this is it. So I'll modify the size of the screen as needed. Is that kind of small for you? Can you hear me?
If you can blow it up a little bit, I can read it, but I have to get up close like this. That's better.
That's good.
It's almost too big, but you can definitely read it. Okay, so there were 6 main categories, and I just want to quickly run through those categories and not get into the tasks, but certainly read this. And by the way, after this meeting, since I didn't realize this document wasn't in your packet, I don't believe, I didn't see it. I'll email this to Jenny and she can send that out. So the first task under infrastructure is really to establish a 20-year plan for financing. So that would be of particular importance to you all. And what we try to do under each of the goals, so again, this is the category that we fit, that the council really gave us 6 broad categories that we've really tried to fit both our city budget into as well as our CIP. So when you see the city budget and you see the CIP, it's going to align with these categories of prioritization that the council has come up with, starting with infrastructure. And so within each of the categories, we have kind of broad goals and then a set of tasks that go along with those goals. So you can see there, we want to establish that 20-year plan and the tasks associated with that goal. And then the next one is quite related, and we're kind of thinking about the way we can potentially combine these two. But these are actually a little bit different in that a 20-year plan for financing infrastructure may look a little different from our actual CIP. So we want to continue, and you can see there is some overlap between these tasks. But in each of the different goals, we also kind of outlined a 3-year plan of what we know we're going to need to be doing in 2 years from now, as well as our current year. Another big part of our infrastructure struggles, I think, long term, and frankly, many cities are struggling with this, is the fact that we have not done a good job of managing what assets we have. And so the city council set a goal of establishing a citywide asset management. This next one was very specific, which was, I think their goal was actually just repair potholes. We put a timeline to that, but within 7 days of when they're reported to us. And you can see some of the tasks to do that. This was another one that was very, very specific from a council member. Ensure the gutter line matches pavement. Sometimes, you know, you had that misalignment where if the roadway has been milled down, it's a little bit lower, or maybe the curb has heaved, etc. Reduce the number of structures at risk of flooding in a 25-year storm event by 50%. And what I hope you can see from many of these goals is we really tried to create SMART goals for many of these and put time limits around them, put metrics around them, so we can really see how we're doing, you know, a year from now, 2 years from now, etc. And so you can see all of these tasks, which are quite detailed in terms of what we need to do to actually get to that goal of reducing. The last one on this category is educating the public on the importance of building, maintaining, replacing, and funding infrastructure. So there's some communication tasks. There are certainly tasks for, well, it's actually mostly, because it's an education piece, mostly in our communications department. So, well, first of all, maybe I can stop. My plan is just to run through these categories in the broad goals, but I guess I can look over and see if anybody has questions. In the meantime, I'll just go ahead and run through neighborhoods. So here we have create ad hoc design feedback boards for design input for new construction. And what you'll notice is that some of these, the council has already started having discussions within their study sessions, and I'm trying to think, I don't think anything's gone to, well, a few things have gone to council meetings, regular meetings, but they have been talking about, you know, is there some sort of kind of citizen input process into, you know, new construction that's going on? Because as you know, there's been a lot of discussion around, well, our neighborhood is changing, we don't like it, and in some cases, our neighborhood needs to change more. We hear that occasionally too. So we're in the process of going through a public outreach, just starting it with our Title 16, which is our land development code. And so that's where some of that will be incorporated into. We also have a goal of establishing the neighborhood resource program. Of course, this was done in January 25th, the visioning was, before we had actually hired this individual, but it was budgeted for 2020. So this has been achieved, and that program has been started. And by the way, if you haven't, for keeping up with our COVID efforts, that's the department that's really launched some of our virtual programs, pairing circles, the phone buddies program, some counseling resources. So they've been pretty busy with the work that they're doing. Also related to that, organize the neighborhoods into distinct areas with unique identities. So you may have seen and participated in an online and social media survey that we did to have people actually draw their own neighborhood and give us, what do you think your neighborhood is called? And so everything's been a little on hold as we've shifted our efforts to COVID-19, but as we're getting back into normal operations, we're going to be overlaying those kind of maps and seeing where trends are to see how we can start seeing where neighborhoods are people naturally think that they live, and setting up formalized neighborhoods. We do have 6 people who have already stepped up and said that they want to be neighborhood group leaders. So that's all part of this plan of that goal. The next one is ensure neighbors are connected with one another. And so you can see some of the ways that we've done that. Council recently approved a grant program that can go towards neighborhoods that want to have a block party just for their block or, you know, their surrounding blocks, as an example. Ensure residents feel ownership and connection to law enforcement as well as code enforcement. I thought this was a great goal that council came up with to really make sure that, you know, some of the at times with code enforcement ill will that's out in the community, how can we really work to try to do better and make those relationships better? Ensuring walkability, you can see there are a number of this first task is very specific. It's a walk score. That's a national scoring system of how walkable your neighborhood is. As you can see, many tasks on that. Ensure affordability of our neighborhoods. And so some strategies and tasks around that. Encourage diversity of people and architecture. I have to say, this one we could probably beef up a little. We don't have that many tasks on this yet, but we certainly, once we get prioritization back, be starting on some of these or even other ideas that come from the public. I think this is one of the last goals. Encourage neighbor-to-neighbor connections. I talked about some of that. If I've highlighted something in this document, it's because it requires additional resources. So as you can see, we are recommending creating this grant program. Since this was done, council has actually already approved this in a study session. They gave us direction to go ahead and do that. And but we did end up doing it from existing funds within the Neighborhood Resources Program. Promote resident volunteerism in neighborhoods, strategies around that. Work to ensure residents are informed and engaged with their local government.
Shawn, before you start on the next priority, it looks as though Steve Ward has his hand up. Sorry, Steve. I should have looked at your hand a little sooner. Oh,
Okay.
Steve?
So I have a couple of questions. And I've just been kind of jotting notes as we're going through here. Particularly in the infrastructure areas, the first goals that we were talking about at the top, one thing that's notably absent is the possibility of divesting from certain assets. And I'm wondering if that was something that just got overlooked or if it was intentionally left off.
I don't think we had talked about that. Do you mean like water assets or golf course assets? What type of things do we have in mind?
Well, to me, the water and the golf course both lend themselves pretty well to that discussion, given that we have, at last estimate, $160 million in infrastructure costs associated with water, and we have significant water assets as well. There's a potential balance to be struck there, in my opinion, and a discussion to be had about what we value as a community and what we might be losing in opportunity cost or otherwise.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. It's a conversation that in my my bi-weekly meetings with Councilmember Anderson, he has brought it up too. I will mention that I made the mistake in one of my first meetings with council when we were doing council orientation to say, oh, we got a call from someone wanting to buy our surplus fire station that we're just renting out. And there was not a very positive reception to that. So I'm already a little gun shy about such proposals, but so I think that might be reflective of why you don't see that particular goal in here. But it's certainly something that when you're taking the survey, I think it'd be most appropriate for you to suggest that be added. Okay, moving on to local economy here. The goal here, this is an interesting goal, but to hold commercial vacancy along South Broadway to a minimum by supporting redevelopment of aging properties and supporting new business development. And so a lot of the things that you're going to see in this particular category are the responsibility of community development, which is what the CD means beside these. And then, and of course, our economic development person within the community development department, as well as our redevelopment manager, Dan Paremba. Another goal was to establish a downtown development authority. You've probably seen we've been having lots of meetings. There's been a steering committee formed from the downtown business owners and property owners to really take a look at that. So that's underway. Attract and retain a diversified industry mix, including retail, restaurant, manufacturing, and medical arts. One of the reasons that I think that we're seeing more stability already, just even in our March revenues that we've seen, is because we do have a diversified economy compared to, a Lone Tree or Centennial that are incredibly dependent upon retail. We had our time when this city was very dependent on retail in the form of Cinderella City, But you know, I think that we're much more diversified now and can weather these storms actually a little bit better as a result, because we're not so dependent on that. Promote business to business, or B2B, as it sometimes calls, transactions, as well as shop local. Again, we're a little light on our tasks on that one, I would say, but you know, trying to promote local businesses, I think that's been a very much a highlight of our Inglewood Citizen magazine, as well as on social media, but certainly I think there's more we can do in that in future years. Ensure a focus on locally owned and operated businesses. Redevelop and densify city center. So you see some of these tasks are already underway after this has been created. The master developer is underway. Ensure a pro-business climate while maintaining high standards for development. And so, as you may know, we have a staff committee called the Design Review Committee. And we really work to try to streamline the process, you know, ensuring that staff is doing what they need to do, and having a good process for businesses to come into when they're opening a new business or expanding. Attract and retain a hotel in central Inglewood. So this has been a long-standing goal of the city. You may have heard on Tuesday night, the council gave the green light to putting a hotel occupancy tax or lodgers tax on the ballot for November. Obviously, that is not a tax that's paid by our residents. It's paid by people staying in our hotels. So that actually, you know, when we get a hotel, well, it could be very important for the community. And then retain and sustain local business. So have some goals around that. This one is one that is of particular interest to Councilmember Stone. Talks a lot about this, but I think interesting to all council members. Utilize job training and skills development programs for local business residents and people experiencing homelessness. So we're underway doing some good work in that area. Assess development codes biannually and modify as needed. Ensure development process is equivalent to or better than neighboring communities. So that's going to take some work, but we're in the process of really trying to assess that process, as I mentioned previously. And then I think the next to last one is celebrate economic and redevelopment success. You know, there are a lot of times that, you know, a new business comes in, or our economic development staff really works with and helps, you know, a business, and we get lots of you know, good feedback from that. But can we really tell our own story about the good things that are happening with economic development in Inglewood? Because there's a great story. So you can see we've got some good plans for that. And then last, ensure commercial areas like neighborhoods have unique character and pedestrian amenities for employees and visitors. You know, as you look at a downtown area, you want to make sure that it has a unique set of an identity, and people know when they're entering downtown. But I would actually expand that to even our manufacturing areas. It's not always the most pleasant drive when you're driving around our manufacturing areas. How can we, you know, work with businesses in those areas to clean up and beautify those areas, and maybe establish, you know, a northwest manufacturing district. I mean, you know, naming those, maybe getting some street banners to really give that area a sense of identity and pride for those areas. Moving on to safety, develop sustainable solutions for both humans and living things. And so we really are going to be planning on combining that with the sustainability section, which is next on the list after safety. We're also wanting to pursue zero vehicular, pedestrian, and cyclist deaths. And so that's a big goal. And how do we make our intersections safer? How do we make our speeds safer throughout the community, which speaks to the next one. Reduce speed in neighborhoods and traffic calming measures where appropriate. Build, maintain, replace, and fund a quality stormwater drainage system. Certainly when we think of safety for the community, you have to have a functioning stormwater drainage system. Provide community resiliency against man-made and natural disasters. So, you know, I have to say the one thing about COVID-19, we are all very well versed in exactly how an emergency operations should be operated. And we've established actually one of the first in the county incident management command system, and we have now put that down or ceased that and shifted strictly to a recovery effort. because we're no longer kind of in the emergency phase. Also ensure high quality public safety services. So how are we doing with our co-responder program, code enforcement, policing, and that sort of thing. Research and implement innovative and effective best practices used throughout the country for both police and code enforcement. Council, I think their goal in this one was be innovative in policing. So this is kind of how we put some, a little more specificity to that, looking at a restorative justice system, the Tri-Cities group that's working on homelessness and focusing on those areas. Rounding this out, ensure the built environment is constructed in a safe manner through SEPTAD. SEPTAD stands for Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. It's something that, unfortunately, we don't have anyone on staff that is certified in this. I think Tony Arnaldi has done some work in the past, but we really need to be thinking about when we're designing, redesigning parks. There are some areas of the city that are literally designed to promote criminal activity. And we've got to be thinking about when we're doing projects, capital projects, we design those to really reduce crime and keep things open where you can have visual sight lines, etc. I'm thinking of a particular shelter at a park near here at the Civic Center. Ensure widespread knowledge of property maintenance codes for both residential and commercial properties. That's a real communication task. Ensure well-maintained residential, commercial properties throughout the city. And I believe this is the last category, sustainability. Consider long-term sustainability and infrastructure. So these are still very much being developed, but we want to be sustainable financially. We also want to be sustainable, even as we redevelop and change the infrastructure potentially in the city center area. How can we incorporate sustainable energy and other methods to really make sure that we're being as efficient as possible. Another goal here was to move toward a green energy grid with steps towards energy independence. Obviously, a very large, difficult task, but this was a specific task, even within our own buildings. How can we partner with the nonprofit sector to reduce our energy costs? There are lots of good ways to do that. Next, support pollinators, particularly in parks, and cut the use of pesticides. So if you watch the council request, you'll see one coming out this week about our pesticide reduction efforts. Implement strategies that will respond to climate variability. This would be a big increase, and I don't believe this is going to appear in the proposed budget this year because I don't think the department felt like this was something that we could afford potentially this year, but we do think that long term, if we're really going to have a focus on sustainability, we're going to need someone who's focused on doing that work. Working with businesses, working with homeowners, working with the city itself. So here's some tasks around working with homeowners and businesses, creating a sustainability office, an awards program for sustainability, etc. Build solar gardens and encourage energy efficient homes and businesses. Maintain the current built environment and maximize the life cycle of newer high profile buildings like the police station, even working with the schools on how they can do that too. Next is developing a proactive capital plan to address capital maintenance. Certainly that goes with many of the items under infrastructure, but how can we do that in a sustainable way? I would have to say we're a little behind as a community on recycling efforts. I realize we have a number of vendors who do provide that, but this is one that the council put forth. Improving stormwater quality. So thinking about, it's not just how do we get the water through the pipes so it doesn't flood. It's also about how do we design our infrastructure to help filter the water so when it runs into the South Platte, it's cleaner, it's better for the environment. And frankly, it's regulated by the federal government. We actually have mandates that we have to do that. That's why we do street sweeping. It's not just to keep things pretty. It's because if we aren't street sweeping the streets, we're getting more debris and sediment into our rivers as well as into our infrastructure. Address aging irrigation systems in parks. Steve knows this from working on Parks Bond question that was being looked at potentially, that the irrigation systems are sometimes over $1 million. in some of these parks and certainly at the golf course. So how are we looking at that long term? Engage in sustainable water futures that employ water efficient systems. Invest in water infrastructure, which this is nearly complete, those water and wastewater master plans. Actually, the plans are complete. Now we're working on the rate and fee analysis. Pursue funding partnerships regionally and nationally for water programs, increase conservation, educate the public regarding where our water comes from, how available is it, how can we conserve more. And then I think this is one of the last ones, improve taste and clarity of Inglewood water. It's a complaint that we get pretty often in comparison to our surrounding towns. We don't have the best tasting water, so what can we do to help with that? And then improve trash handling. And you can see that that is a more vague goal, I think in a good way, just to represent the different perspectives on the question of single trash haulers and just how can we handle our trash better. Oh, I'm sorry, I have one more after this one. Increase efficiency of irrigation systems in parks. Mention that. The transportation, I believe, is our last category. So the goal here, first one, is to develop a system of non-motorized trails and paths that are safe, separated from vehicular traffic and connect the whole city. Develop traffic calming measures to reduce speeds in neighborhoods. That one is a repeat. Some of these, as you can see, fit into multiple categories. Increase ridership on RTD transit options in Inglewood. Improve auto safety and travel times on Broadway, Hamden, and Bellevue. You can see we have quite a few, as you may know and have seen in the capital improvement project plan. The US 285 Broadway interchange. The council last night moved forward on a contract for that work and designing that work. So that will begin in 2021, as you can see. So quite a few tasks around that. Develop integrated mobility systems such as bike and pedestrian routes and trails through partnerships with surrounding communities. Improve safety and walkability from neighborhoods to parks and schools. And resolve dangerous crossing areas. An ongoing task of our public works department. So that is the end of that. So thank you. Hope that wasn't too long and arduous for you. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't see any, Shawn, at the moment.
All right, well, we're glad to come back and keep you abreast of the progress on this. Like I said, the survey is currently out to the public. I think as of a week and a half ago, for a few days on social media, we had 46 respondents, so that was positive. So I'm sure we have many, many more since then, and we'll keep you updated as the council progresses in development of this.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I did not click the raise my hand button. Can you speak a little bit to the item diversity of people in architecture? I should back up a little bit. I completed the survey maybe last week and I really struggled with it. I wish that I had waited until I had seen this and heard what you had to say before I completed it. But there were some sections, to be honest, that I just skipped right over because it was just causing too much brain damage. And so I made a few notes as you were speaking, but that was one of the first things I wanted to ask about was diversity. How do you define that? What do you want to focus on?
Yeah, so let's just walk through some of the tasks that we have on this particular goal. And I have to say, this one probably can use some more work on the task, and we actually hope to get some feedback potentially from the public and further clarification from the council on what they'd like to see. But we did do a next steps study that's underway. It's part of our the Civic Center study that's currently going on, and the Downtown Development Authority group that's working. And they're looking at design options for the central portion of the city, which is city center, downtown, and the hospital district. And how can we, have distinct kind of areas that reflect our diversity within that central part of the city, but also, have a more kind of coordinated approach and think of us as 3 separate groups or areas of the city in one district. So really, I think council was really thinking more along the lines, and Councilman Russell, you can chime in terms of within the neighborhood, you know, we want to have a diversity of architecture, but we chose, I think staff chose, and have not gotten redirection from council yet, to focus more on the commercial, because frankly, diversity in the neighborhoods of architecture is quite controversial. I think it goes to the question of, you know, maybe some review boards that could help look at that, as opposed to staff kind of creating goals about how to increase diversity. There are many people who want us to decrease diversity. But when you think about people, we don't have good goal or tasks around that. We have created inside the city just a staff committee for our own organization on how we become more diverse and inclusive. But, you know, I think really when we kind of get a game plan on how we want to do that as an organization, we'd really like to talk to the community about, you know, how important is diversity and how do we be an inclusive community that welcomes everyone. And so those are tasks that are not currently.
So with respect to diversity and people, it sounds like diversity has yet to be defined. We aren't necessarily focusing on socioeconomics or generational diversity or ethnic diversity. It has yet to be defined, and maybe it's very inclusive of all those things I just mentioned.
I would say so, but I think your comment that hasn't been defined is absolutely correct.
Okay.
And Shawn, we have a hand up from Steve.
So speaking of hot button political buzzwords, if we could go back to the sustainability section and talk a little bit about the climate item. Personally, I think that we would probably get a lot more buy-in from the general public if we used a word like preparing for weather events or something along those lines, rather than sustainability through climate change. There are some, you know, favorite words that certain groups use that cause an immediate visceral reaction to other groups, and this is one of those things. So I would strongly suggest, if you want to get any traction on that, or at least reduce resistance, rephrasing.
Yeah, I remember during the visioning session that council specifically used the term climate variability, but you're right, probably weather variability might be better. Is that's what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. Anything else?
I've got another one. I guess I have a question and a comment regarding education, business development. The keyword in there was homelessness, and I think it was maybe 2/3 in to the document. So I guess my question is, how do we identify the individuals who can benefit from, utilize job training and skills development programs for local businesses, residents, and people experiencing homelessness? So particularly the people who are experiencing homelessness, how do we identify those who would benefit most from such programs? Because as those of us on the call know, homelessness is a spectrum. There are people who are on the brink of homelessness, those who are couch surfing, living out of their cars, who just need a hand up. And then there are people who, no matter what services are provided to them, will continue to be challenged. And of course, we want to focus on those who will benefit most from the hand up. So I guess my question is, like I mentioned before, how do we identify those people? And my comment is, we might want to tweak that terminology so that our fellow residents who review this document and the survey understand who we're targeting, because there are some people who see homelessness as not universal, what's the word I'm looking for? One category.
Yeah, that's a good point. Huh. Yeah, it's interesting that you zeroed in on that, and I agree it is the most kind of sticking out word, isn't it? really three different groups that we're focused on. That just happens to be one of them. Is people experiencing homelessness in addition to local businesses and residents. But yeah, so you're thinking maybe we should be more specific, maybe in terms of people trying to re-enter the workforce or something like that?
Yeah. Yes.
Great, I'll make a note of that.
Yeah.
And then Shawn, it looks like Steve has another question.
Great.
I'm good. I just turned my video off, by the way, because I'm eating my dinner. So I
Oh,
don't want
okay.
everybody watching me eat my dinner.
All righty, I think Councilmember Russell has a question.
Actually, I have kind of a comment. I appreciate this feedback. And to Suzanne's question about homelessness, my takeaway of that one in particular was really brought up a lot by Councilmember Stone, who is more focusing on people who are underemployed and who need to be trained, perhaps with a job. Now, I'm not saying that there were other council members that talked about homelessness, and Shawn, I can't necessarily address it from their position, but I think Councilmember Stone enunciated pretty well what his focus was. I don't know if that helps.
I think that would be a much better way to describe that is for local businesses, residents, and people who are underemployed or unemployed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I liked your phrase, people who need to re-enter the workforce. So I just think that those words have more meaning to the larger community. And you'll get more accurate and valuable feedback with that terminology as opposed to homelessness, which includes groups of people that we aren't necessarily targeting.
Well, I think probably there are enough council members, if I recall correctly, who did want that maybe the task could keep homelessness kind of like one of the tasks. But the overall goal, I agree, is a little too specific in terms of a population. So, are we saying the same thing? Because I do think that there are plenty of council members who would like to see at least one of the goals remain about job training programs that focus on people experiencing homelessness. But maybe about how we're also working with those who are underemployed, unemployed, businesses that want to help train their employees and.
Yeah, it sounds like we're all on the same page. And then if I may, I've got one more question / comment. Business development and promotion on South Broadway. How do we define South Broadway? Is that Inglewood's downtown area? Does that include Broadway between Hamden and Bellevue?
Rita, you may, Councilmember Russell, you may want to weigh in, but I think they were really talking about the south, like south of Hamden, but because they had other things that were focused on downtown. What was your recollection?
Let's see, am I on? Okay. I don't remember. Could you phrase your question again, Suzanne?
Yeah, hold commercial vacancy along South Broadway to a minimum. When we think of South Broadway, exactly which stretch of South Broadway? Is that Hamden to Bellevue? Is that the downtown area? How do we define South Broadway? Which blocks in particular?
Okay, and Shawn, what did you say?
I think council was focused on this goal in terms of Hamden to Bellevue, because they had plenty of other things that were talking about downtown, and so I would assume that it was the area from Hamden to Bellevue.
And I mean, it could be, but when I think of this, and I know some things are going on downtown, like in the 34, 3300 block, there were a lot of vacant businesses, but some of those have, like that one business across from Rico's had been closed forever. and they're remodeling that building right now, right? So it could be both.
You're right, it could. And frankly, I'm going to put that down as a question for council because obviously I'm not sure of the answer.
Well, and some of these things like conduct exit interviews with companies closing or leaving Inglewood, I think that is probably citywide in all of the business districts. And the ACE committee had been talking about some of these things with businesses, so maybe some of these ideas came from ACE committee interviews too.
Could have been. All right, anything else? Oh, I think you're muted, Jenny.
Sorry, Shawn. Donna has her hand up.
Great.
Hi, Shawn. Thank you for sharing this. I wanted to just put another 2 cents in on that that goal where we included homelessness.
Uh-huh.
And I was wondering if it was necessary to break out that particular, with that particular language, if it wasn't inclusive enough to just say businesses and residents, or if there was some concern that that particular group was being left out by the language of resident, because I didn't think that the word resident implied that you necessarily lived in a building.
That's true.
And then the other question I had, is this a working document?
It is, and I want to acknowledge something that Councilmember Russell has very rightly pointed out on a couple of occasions, and that is, many of these things are already underway. And I think that where we had consensus, broad consensus from council, or council had previously built some of these tasks into the budget for the 2020 budget back in 2019, we are moving fast ahead. I will tell you where we do not have consensus on some of these, like for instance, the sustainability goal, we have not moved on those. So we have really tried to be cognizant of where council, that we feel, that we have broad support from either discussions that we've had during meetings or as expressed through the budget document and the 2020 budget document, we're moving ahead with many of these. But for other categories, we are not moving ahead because we simply don't have, I think consensus yet.
So is this document being distributed, is it available currently to the public?
It is, vis-a-vis the survey that's out right now to the public. So all of these categories and goals that the public can vote on those now. And then we do have this draft document, although you'd have to find it on a council agenda. I'll have to check and see if we got this particular document just on a web page as opposed to on the council agenda.
Well, one of the reasons I'm asking that is that, and I'm happy to volunteer to do this, but I've caught at least one typo in here already, and so it looks like it maybe needs, a proofreading.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Feel free to shoot me an email or just let me know that we'll get that fixed. But it is absolutely a working document. But I still would rather not have typos in it.
Good. I know that that'll represent us well without the typos, or represent us better.
All right. Well, if there are no further questions, I think I'm going to have to jump on the planning commission meeting pretty soon. So let me get ready for that. Jenny, I think you're muted if you're.
Thank you, Shawn.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You guys have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shawn.
All right, so Suzanne, I think we're ready for our next agenda item.
Yeah. So Director D'Andrea, we get to learn all about Public Works. This is one of my favorite departments to hear from. And I'd love to hear what you have to say, but you're muted as well.
Sorry about that. I can never get it right. Well, that's good to hear. So I was going to say, we're probably one of the least sexy departments, you know, of what we do, trying to keep a lid on everything. And hopefully, you know, if you don't hear from us, everything's good. So the toilet flushes, the streets get plowed, all of that. So, but I'm excited to be here tonight. I think know pretty much everybody. So I do have a PowerPoint that I'll share with you. I'll just pull that up. And please stop me along the way. I'll take questions. I'll pause a couple times to take questions. But I'm just going to give kind of an overview of the Public Works Department. And then I know there were a couple of questions that you specifically wanted us to address. So that's the last slide. So first, for the Public Works Department, our mission overall is to promote and ensure a high quality of life, economic vitality, and a uniquely desirable community identity. That's kind of the common mission for the city. And so the last part there is really unique to Public Works. So through delivery of quality projects, programs, and services. And that's really how we look and break down our work, is through projects, programs, and services. And you'll see some of that as we go through it here. I've been with the city, it'll be 2 years in about a month. And so really what we've been focused on is building a high performance team. So how do we deliver quality projects, programs, and services? It's really through our staff. And so on the right there, you see our values as far as accountability, quality, efficiency, and respect for ourselves, for each other, and for the public. So we talk a lot about this. How do we become high performance? How do we, you know, tie back to that mission? All of that in all that we do. This just shows our organizational chart. Just gonna move that. So you can see there's a total of 57 positions. Most of those are within operations and maintenance. And that it covers facilities, which also we have our own custodial staff. So that's 13 positions right there. That operations and maintenance also encompasses our fleet maintenance division, as well as streets maintenance. What's not reflected here is just recently, probably within the last couple of months, we have taken on the stormwater division. So for about the last 8 months or so, I was serving as both the Director of Public Works and the Director of Utilities, the Interim Director of Utilities, and we've recently made that change. So I'm just the Director of Public Works, but we've taken on the Stormwater Division within Public Works, and we're probably going to call that out as a separate division. We're still working through some of those details and what that staffing looks like. So I've touched over here. So our divisions, admin, engineering, and capital projects is really one major focus for us. So that's its own division. We're trying to deliver a significant amount of capital projects, and that really is a special skill set. You know, I'm an engineer, but you don't necessarily learn that in school, how to go about overseeing and managing a project. So we're focusing on that in terms of training within the department and staffing so that we can take that all the way from design and planning through design and then ultimately through construction. I mentioned facilities, fleet, streets, and then we also have traffic engineering and operations. So they're responsible for, we have 64 traffic signals in town. We also maintain the ones along US 285 on behalf of CDOT. We do get some money back for that from CDOT to do that. And then we take care of all the regulatory signs that are in the right of way. So like the stops, no parking, that sort of thing all falls within that group. And then our department is responsible for the Inglewood Environmental Foundation as well, which is it's about 55 acres in and around the Civic Center. So we oversee the contracts for maintenance there, as well as kind of day-to-day management. This just gets a little bit more into detail of what each of those divisions does. So it really runs the gamut, but a lot of it, and I'll get into this in my next or few slides, you know, it's really about taking care of stuff, taking care of the assets that we have. And how do we do that in not only with quality, but in an efficient manner. So I really like to think about it, you know, so each asset, if you will, so traffic signals, just as an example, we have 64 of them. How do we take care of those in a proactive manner? How are we, you know, monitoring the condition of each of those, making sure that we're replacing them or maintaining them on a regular basis, and making sure we have the resources and then are budgeting accurately and appropriately for those different assets. So again, with 64 signals, even if we replaced one a year, that's a 64-year lifespan. So they're probably not going to last 64 years. So we really have to look at replacing at least one, if not, and what I put in the CIP budget this year was really doing a replacement of one and then a major rehab of another one. So that was about $800,000. A new signal is roughly $500,000. So it's not a cheap asset. It's a big investment. And that's why we're also looking through some of our capital projects and our traffic and transportation analysis is, does it make sense to remove those signals in lieu of roundabouts or other kind of traffic calming measures that could still work and to keep traffic flowing without the need for having that signal there. So any questions at this point? I'll just stop and ask.
I have one question, but I'm going to be a savage and not raise my hand. Regarding the engineering division, I'm curious where the line lies between hiring contractors to engineer and execute our projects and doing them in-house.
Yeah, that's something we talk about a lot. So a lot of we can do things in-house. We have the capability to do design and as well as construction management and putting plans and specifications together. So some of our routine stuff is certainly things that we handle internally. So I would say like our annual pavement maintenance projects, we just bid out actually and are awarding a project to do some water main work, a new hydrant, and some parking lot work at the rec center. So I would say it's probably the scale of the project. You know, I would say, I don't want to put a dollar amount on it, but typically less than $500,000, and where it's more routine and the same each year, that's something that we could do internally.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I'll just touch on this briefly, but some of our accomplishments in 2019. So our group overall managed the completion of the police headquarters building. So that was about a $31 million project. Again, we had a lot of outside help with that. We had a construction manager, but it still takes somebody within the department or within the city to be that interaction, to process payments, to make decisions, coordinate with police, bring things to city council for approval when necessary, and really facilitating all of those different little aspects, as you can imagine, of how you get to the finish line on a project of that size. We're pretty proud of this. We replaced or installed, where there weren't any, 159 new pedestrian ramps. So we're excited about that. Of course, that's an ADA requirement, is that you have to show progress each year that you're trying to upgrade those pedestrian ramps to meet their current guidelines. And we felt like we did a good job of that. We also installed some new sidewalk along the north side of Girard, kind of between Swedish and Craig Hospital. So that was really well received by both hospitals. There was either not any sidewalk in those locations, or sometimes it was too narrow. So they do have to be at least 42 inches in order to meet ADA. And again, there is a lot of pedestrian activity in that area, and so we focused on that to add some sidewalk and a missing gap. We also were able to secure over $10 million in federal transportation funding. This is a big deal. That equates to, I believe it was about 40% of Arapahoe County's allocation. This past round of funding that's done every 4 years through DRCOG. And that's going to go towards 3 specific projects. One is the Broadway and US 285 interchange. Shawn just mentioned that in his presentation. Then we're going to build a bridge over Oxford Avenue on the east side of the railroad tracks. So that will connect basically over to the rec center, allow people, if you're traveling along that trail, to cross over Oxford without having to go down to street level to get to that light rail station there just to the north. And then the third project was a congestion mitigation study, and that extends all the way from the signals, which are west of, it's along 285. So the signal at Lowell and Knox Court, if you're familiar, kind of west of Sheridan. I believe that might be on the border with Lakewood, and then extending all the way to I-25. So it's about a 6.5 mile corridor. So federal transportation funding, city funding, and we also got money from CDOT and Cherry Hills Village and Sheridan as well to do that. So that's really a multi-agency effort.
Wow. If I can just clarification for the Oxford Bridge, it's going to run across Oxford or across Navajo Windermere?
Yes, north-south across Oxford, just to the west of that intersection.
That's fantastic. That's really great. Okay,
yep.
Thank you.
Yep. So we just a couple other things here. So we did complete that flood-prone area study of all the stormwater deficiencies within the city, focusing on the flood-prone areas. We're now looking to implement those projects, along with, we just completed a rate study or a rate increase, and hopefully moving forward with that with design. We also did some what we call flashing yellow arrows. You've probably seen these at different signals. So we've done that along the signals along 285, including some reflective black plates for safety. We also installed those on-street bike lanes along Dartmouth Avenue, which have also been very well received by the public. In our operations and maintenance areas, let's see, I'll just touch on, we've been going through and doing more of the alley work. So trying to grade those so that they drain better, as well as stabilizing them with some of our millings that we take off of our streets. We save those and actually reuse them in alleys to create a more stable base than just reusing like dirt or kind of a mix of gravel and this asphalt millings actually works a lot better. We did an online pothole patching map, which has been great. And then we also implemented some various things to do, better maintenance activities, kind of managing people's time within custodial and our facility staff. And as I mentioned, fleet is a big part of our department, that expends a lot of money. And we actually purchased and outfitted 16 police department vehicles. So they were a long time coming. And so they've got good tools for them to use as they're out and about within the community. All right, so our goals going forward for this year. Here you can see again, I'm focused on projects, programs, and then studies. So we are hoping to start construction later this year in our Dartmouth Bridge Widening Project. That's just west of US 85 at Dartmouth as you go kind of up towards the northwest corner of town. We're also hoping to complete design of several of our stormwater capital projects. We want to complete the design for Oxford Pedestrian Bridge that we just talked about, and then construction would occur in 2021. We're also continuing with the fine alley grading work and dust suppressant. Oops, sorry. Later this month, probably, let's see, yeah, within the next month, we will be performing what's called a slurry seal on Oxford Avenue, essentially between Windermere and all the way to Broadway. And then we'll be installing, with the striping that will occur afterwards, we'll be installing on-street bike lanes on that street for that entire stretch. So that'll be exciting. So again, kind of our programs, we're working through zones for our pavement maintenance, doing some vehicle detection camera work on some of our signals. And we hope to complete our garbage and recycling single hauler or organized collection evaluation yet this year and bring that to council for a decision. And then, so we have completed actually the stormwater rate study. We're beginning to work on the bonding effort to move forward with that, hopefully. We're also moving forward with our pavement management inventory and rating and establishing division levels of service. So any questions on that before I move on?
Yes, I would like to ask about the balance between alley maintenance and street maintenance.
Okay.
I know that there's been a pretty significant push-pull over the last several years regarding, in particular, alleys. But personally, to me, and people who have been in this group for a while or listened to our recordings will have heard me make multiple rants about my alley in particular and how I really don't care about what condition it's in. The street that we drive on and that the guests and people who drive through Inglewood drive on is vastly more important than the alley, to me, personally. So I admit that I'm coloring that through my lens and I'm not the person who has to take the phone calls. But I'm curious about how that balance is established. What is there a role of council in doing that, or is it a staff role, and is it ongoing, or is it decided at the beginning of the year?
Sure. I think from a funding perspective, our funds for pavement maintenance are far exceed what we put into both from monetary and staff resources into streets versus alleys. But what I think hasn't occurred over the last couple of years is we haven't done a whole lot of alley maintenance. And to my point earlier, I think we've been doing some grading, but we haven't created what we're doing now, which is creating more of a V in order to make that drainage work and the asphalt millings, you know, so they would go in there to grade, like if they got a complaint about a pothole in an alley, but it didn't really work towards a better solution. So we're trying to be more, we are expending more resources to do that, but I think hopefully then it will last longer than what it has in the past. But, and I'll touch on this in just a minute, I think we are still putting in a significant amount of effort into our streets and continuing to do so. And I think, you know, the dollar amounts we spent roughly, I think it was just over 1.4 million last year to do our slurry seal, our mill and overlay, and some other work that we done more reactive. And I think we're gearing up now to be more on a cycle to spend at least that amount or more each year going forward. Does that help, Steve?
It does, and I wasn't meaning to imply neglect. You know, I can just give you anecdotally, you know, some minor issues that I never noticed before that have come up, but that's probably for a conversation between us as opposed to the group as a whole.
Sure.
So I was wondering if there was a correlation. I think you've answered well to that. Thank you.
Okay. So one of the questions that was posed is, what were your 2019 and 2020 budget requests? And I came in June of 2018. So in that process, as I was looking back and kind of researching this, we didn't have very specific budget requests for that cycle. So we did not request any personnel. We didn't really request any specific dollar amounts for various programs. But in 2020, I did make several requests, and these were all approved for the 2020 budget, which is great. So we asked for a custodial position, additional one for the police headquarters building. That was because the previous building was roughly, I want to say, about 32,000 square feet, and we're just over 52,000 square feet with the new building. So we increased that by 20,000 square feet. We want to make sure we take care of that building really well, and that position was approved. We also wanted to, or asked for an asset manager position. So what that means is that, you know, when we talk about, again, about traffic signals as an asset or streets as an asset, how do we manage those in an effective manner and consistently? So we are in the process of purchasing some asset management software, and this position would then be tasked with managing all of that data and helping us create programs or tasks to go through each year to implement that, to stay on top of it. So using my traffic signal example again, what do we need to do each year to make sure that we're handling and managing that asset? We'd also got a project engineer position approved, and that was based on the increased project workload that was identified. And then we did receive some additional resources as well for alley maintenance. So we were going to do, we're just in the process of completing the kind of southwest corner of town with this fine grading and dust suppressant. And so we were able to do, we're going to do another zone later this summer, and those funds were approved as well. Okay. So I just wanted to touch again on just our pavement management and our asset management overall. So you can see here the map on the left, we've divided the city into 5 zones. So last year, and what we're doing is we're each, oops, sorry about that. We're going, we do this on a rotating basis. So you can see here, the idea is that we're doing different types of maintenance, corrective, routine, and preventative in different areas based on the year. So this year for 2020, we're in zone 2. We've identified our projects there. We're also concentrating all of our sidewalk work in that same zone. So that's the corrective. That's what we, mostly what we do is mill and overlay that's considered under that corrective category. For 2020, we're also then going to be doing routine maintenance in area 4. And what routine involves is that our own staff goes out and does crack sealing of streets in preparation for the following year. Then we'll come back, as you can see here, preventative lags routine by 1 year. The following year, we would come back and do the preventative maintenance. And preventative is really about sealing the top of the road to prevent it from any further damage. So we're trying to save those streets that are still in good condition. And then for 2020 for preventative is zone 3. And we just finished up, or in the process, staff is finishing up the crack sealing in this area. In preparation, we're going to be doing some slurry seal work. So the important thing is that not every street gets a treatment, but we work in those areas in order to consolidate the work and also to streamline communications with both the public as well as the contractor and with any private utility work that needs to occur under there. So this is really an example for me of what we're trying to do from an asset management standpoint. Before, what used to happen is, oh, let's do, you know, a street over here. Oh, and let's do this street over here and here. So it was very random. And now we're trying to concentrate it and really look at the condition of the street and then what type of maintenance is the right street for that, or the right treatment for that particular street, as opposed to saying, oh, you know, very, either based on complaints or based on, you know, some other criteria. We're trying to be much more methodical about it.
So just to clarify that, Maria, you're still doing complaint-based maintenance. This zone stuff is scheduled maintenance, correct?
Correct, yeah. So if we have potholes, obviously we're taking care of those. If somebody has a complaint, we'll go out and certainly investigate it. But the idea is that we're trying to get, and every 5 years, that by the time we're getting around there, that we're hopefully getting ahead of ourselves more and more, so that we reduce the amount of reactive and start to be more proactive in our approach. But there'll always be that, you know, kind of stuff that we need to react to. And then I believe this is my final slide. So you'd asked, you know, are there any specific projects, programs, or needs where either additional funding is needed or where there's concerns about funding being cut? And I don't think there's a concern. You know, I believe City Council was very supportive through the last process as we talked about asset management overall, this idea of our, having to invest in our infrastructure. I think that message really hit home. And so we were fortunate to really have strong support from City Council as we went through the budget process. But I would just, again, kind of focus on this idea of creating and implementing asset management plans. And really our key elements are the stormwater, pavement or our streets, alleys, as well as traffic signals. So those are really the key areas that I want to focus on going forward. I would also mention just constructing missing gaps in sidewalk infrastructure. So we do have, I think it's, we've done an inventory, there's about 8 miles, if you can believe that, of different areas where there is no sidewalk. And you would think, oh, as you drive around, it's very, our grid block system is very, has a lot of sidewalks, but there are gaps. And typically it's because of either some, either a structure or something with the topography has caused it to make it really difficult to build those. But we'd like to look at that more and really maybe try and put some more funding for that as we encourage people to walk and bike, as well as just, be more mobile within the community without necessarily having to use their car all the time. And then finally, focusing on stormwater quality and detention. That's been a big focus for the city over the last couple of years. So how do we do that, through our own projects, but also through private development? And so while, we've tried to make the requirements more stringent for private development, while also recognizing that they have limited space for a redevelopment site to do that, but really it's working together. So as to try and limit the amount of impervious area, as well as then how can we create detention areas so that we don't have flooding on private property. And then finally, if your total budget were to increase by 10% today, how would you allocate the funds? And really, it's about, again, just having the staffing to manage that. Making sure we have those internal resources or the external resources to manage projects effectively, as well as project communication. I think that's an area where we're also seeing people want to know what's going on. So how do we communicate with them? Not everybody's on social media, not everybody's, checking the website every day. So still using those formal methods of mailers, door hangers. We're trying to use our variable message board signs more often, but really hitting people in multiple ways so that they understand what's going on and hopefully are aware before we move in with the construction equipment. And then as well as project management training. So really focusing again on that skill set to make sure that we're have the staff that can do that effectively. And with that, that was all I had. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Maria, I don't see.
Sorry.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Okay.
go ahead, Steve.
So can we go back to the ETH maintenance contract? I'm curious as to
I'm sorry, what?
the ETH maintenance, Inglewood Environmental Foundation,
Okay.
the site maintenance contract.
Mhm.
It was listed as one of the 2019 accomplishments. And
Okay.
I'm curious as to how we ensure performance on that contract.
Mhm.
As far as, I've heard Councilman Stone talk about this from time to time, price versus value.
Mhm.
What are we doing as a city to ensure that our contractor is actually doing what we're paying them to do?
Yeah, so we did write new scopes of work when we issued those requests for proposals. So they were much more detailed than anything that had been done in the past, but there's really no levels of service, if you will, like you have to perform to this level. And really, we've struggled quite a bit with the contractors that we had. We're having to coordinate with them, every single day about, trash pickup or, things left, leaves or whatever that aren't swept up, even though that's part of the scope of work. And so it's really managing them to a very high level. So we're actually looking at changing out those, doing a new request for proposal and trying to maybe put more of those qualitative things like, it's got to be to this level as opposed to the detailed, you shall do this, 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 and this, because it doesn't seem to be working for us. So we are looking at that right now for this next season, if you will.
Thank you. That's something that I would advocate for strongly. The city center, kind of the front door of Inglewood for a lot of people. So I think that's an important area to keep clean and snow-free. I also don't like to be walking into City Hall and almost fall on my butt because it's icy. So that's the other thing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's 6:38. Our next agenda item is to review draft annual report topics. I don't know if you guys have anything or want to speak to that, or if you want to table it to our next meeting.
This is one of those things we're going to have to get to eventually.
I think it's going to have to be a agenda item higher up, an item that lands higher on the agenda.
Yeah, I think we might actually consider scheduling a special meeting. We're sort of waist deep in the budget cycle right now.
Yeah.
Council just had their capital discussion. P&Z's weighed in on the capital proposals. Some things are starting to come in, and I think the timeline is not getting longer. It's getting shorter. So we should probably consider putting in a little extra work to make sure that we get our product out in a timely manner so that it's still useful.
Okay, a bonus back meeting. Yeah. Donna, any thoughts about that?
Are we able to have just a work meeting, where we're not being recorded and, it's not a public meeting per se, but we just have a work meeting and then we bring that material to our public meeting, or is that not within our parameters?
I think if we have a quorum, it needs to be on the books. Is that right, Jenny?
Yes, that's correct. We either have to be.
One of the things we've done in the past is we've assigned specific topic areas and formed subcommittees. And those subcommittees have, explored in pairs those topic groups. I remember 5 or 6 years ago, I spent a Saturday afternoon at former Chairman Harvey's house, hashing through some matters on that. I've worked with Suzanne in the last couple of years in the past as well. So as far as getting more content developed for approval by the other groups, Donna, I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. It also helps spitball some ideas and bring them to the group as a whole. So subcommittees, two people. If you have a quorum, you have to post it and record it.
Yeah, and I think this agenda item really came from Joel when he suggested that we discuss 1 or 2 hot topics from the previous meeting. So maybe what we can do offline is get a document together that comprises all of those ideas, whether we've discussed them or not, and then we can go from there and develop subcommittees. And I can coordinate that.
I also suspect that the product that might be useful to council this year might be more philosophical than actual objects on a checkbox.
Yeah, I think in the last 3 months, all things budget have been thrown in a jar and it's all jumbled up now. So our philosophy might be a bit different now in May than it was in January pre-COVID. So,
Well, I'm definitely willing to, work with someone. It just seems like we really need to do some, we need to do that hashing out and that discussion and get some things down on paper so that we've got something to discuss as a group. So I like you know, Steve, the way y'all approached that in the past, where a couple of us get together and gets, you know, something concrete, you know, put down so that then we have something to discuss as a, you know, when we're in our formal meetings.
I don't know. How do you think what do you think is the most efficient way to proceed, most productive way to proceed? So we can get a meeting on the books before we meet again in June, or we can coordinate via email and then proceed with our subcommittees.
So for the purpose of transparency and complying with the Sunshine Law, my suggestion would be to schedule a meeting in the first or second week of June to sort of hash out logistics exclusively, and kind of coordinate that. We can conduct that meeting on the record, develop our work groups, talk a little bit more about content, and just as opposed to discussing what actually goes on the report, just kind of get a outline, if you will, of some topic areas that we might want to explore.
Donna, you're nodding in agreement?
That sounds good.
Okay.
We need a plan. We need a
Extra
plan
homework.
about how we're going to do it.
Okay. I'm good with that. Jenny, if you can.
We'll get one scheduled.
Sorry
Okay.
to Jenny too.
So you'd like this just to be your only topic then in 2 weeks or
Yeah.
3 weeks time? Okay.
Yeah, I would say 2 weeks, if possible. Yeah.
2 weeks will bring us that first week in June. So June 2nd, June 3rd, around there.
Yeah, that's okay with me.
Okay. Steve and Donna?
1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just looking. Tell me again the dates you suggested, Jenny. The 2nd or the 3rd?
I think, well, the Tuesday might be a second. I'm going to pull up my calendar real
The
quick.
Tuesday is a 2nd. It's June 2nd.
Okay.
2nd or the 9th, probably, if we want to stick to Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Our regular meeting is scheduled for the 23rd that month.
I would push for the 2nd, if we can get a quorum.
Steve and
Okay.
Donna, does the 2nd look good for you at least?
I think that's doable. My only concern with the 2nd is that there's a regular council meeting on the 1st, as opposed to just a study session. And sometimes the regular council meetings go longer. And so we might be asking a lot of staff.
Would you like a different day that week?
That might actually be better if we want to switch to a different day. I don't know how
Either
everybody
Wednesday-
else's schedule goes. I'm
Wednesday or
fairly free
Thursday?
that week. The only day I don't have is Thursday.
Okay.
I'm flexible.
I am too. Wednesday would actually work better for me than Tuesday the 2nd.
Okay. Okay, so we'll try June 3rd.
Yes, that works for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, Suzanne.
Yeah. No, thanks for your thoughts on that.
And will we keep the same time, 5:15 on Wednesday the 3rd?
It's up to you guys.
That would work well for me.
Suzanne, does that work for you? It seems like sometimes that's a push for you.
I'm fine. No.
Is that good?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, thank you. Okay, anything else about that? Okay, member's choice. Donna, do you have anything for member's choice?
What is member's choice?
Oh, where you can share anything that's on your mind relating to city matters, budget, what have you.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Steve?
I don't know that I have anything constructive
Okay.
for this, so I'm gonna hold off right now.
Okay, I've got a quick touchy-feely thing and then we'll adjourn. My husband and I are both lucky that we've been able to maintain our full-time employment. So our way of contributing back to our local economy is by committing to one takeout meal a week. And Gallo has brought meals to the police department, to Swedish, to other local hospitals that I'm affiliated with. So we've bought dinner from them several times over. So if you're looking for a great restaurant, I encourage lots of restaurants, but I'm putting in a plug specifically for Gallo. So if you're craving pizza, not homemade pizza like Steve had tonight, go get a pizza from Gallo. And maybe next meeting I'll plug another restaurant that we're very fond of, but I wanted to throw that out there. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thanks,
Yeah.
Doug. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Councilmember Russell.
We'll
Yeah,
adjourn
thank
and
you.
talk again in a
Thank
couple
you.
weeks.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
See y'all on the 3rd.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Bye-bye.